Hey friends, Chris here with MMA Ecosystem, just hopping on here because just about 12 hours ago, all of the fights for Road to UFC 2023 were dropped by the UFC. Happy that now all the fights are out there, we get to talk about them. We are 6 weeks out and we now have all of the fights at our fingertips. So I want to get into those fights. I've got my computer here so I can show you a couple things, highlight a couple fighters. In this video, I'm going to talk about some of my reactions to the roster in fights. I'm going to talk about some surprises. I'm going to go through some of my picks to win each of the tournaments and just kind of see where we go from there. But I also really want to hear your all's thoughts, your reactions. Here we go. I'm going to put up all of the fights on the screen. Here are all the fights for Road to UFC 2023. The opening round, 8 fights for each weight class, and also 4 non-tournament fights featuring other Asian fighters. Now the reason they do these, I think I'm seeing the purpose of these non-tournament fights aren't necessarily because, like, the way we're not supposed to think about them is as contender series fights, where if they win this fight, even if they get a finish or look halfway good, then they're going to get a UFC contract. There are too many fighters to put into this tournament, or for some of these fighters, their weight class isn't included in the tournament. So they just want to get fighters more experience. I think that's the main purpose of these non-tournament fights, is to get fighters more experience. Some of these fighters have a good record, but they need to take a step up in competition. So this is just to help them get that step up, where the UFC gets to play matchmaker and put them against opponents probably tougher than they've ever faced before. So that's really the purpose of these non-tournament fights. Don't see it as if they win, they get signed to the UFC, or even if they get a finish, then they'll get signed to the UFC. It's not like contender series in that way. Now I will say that this tournament has changed a lot over time. There's supposed to be women's weight classes. At the beginning, it was supposed to be all 3 of the main women's weight classes in the UFC, strawweight through bantamweight. There's supposed to be welterweight. For the women, it's a lot harder for them to fill out a full bracket than you might think. If they were to do this for strawweight, especially for atomweight, then they could probably do it, as most Asian women fight at either atomweight or strawweight. But for flyweight, it's almost impossible to do that. Take it from me, I actually was trying to find women fighters to sign to my management company to get them into Road to UFC. But there really weren't a lot out there, especially I'm talking about flyweight and bantamweight. You also have to realize that a lot of fighters are already locked into contracts with other promotions. A lot of fighters are fighting with Ryzen or with One, and they can't just get out of those contracts, especially on short notice like this. No women, no welterweights. Welterweights, you could maybe fill out a bracket for that. They've got 4 welterweight fights in the non-tournament side. You have to realize for a bracket, you have to not only have 8 fighters, but you also have to have some alternates. So it's not just 8, but it's more like 10 or even 12 fighters that you have to have for each weight class to make a tournament. So at this point, they just may not have been able to fully get the full 8 or 10 or 12 fighters that they wanted out of welterweight. So they ended up just going back to exactly the same weight classes that they had last year, flyweight through welterweight for men. So without further ado, I want to cover just some of the reactions that I have to this roster. So out of all the fighters in the tournament and non-tournament, there's 48 fighters. I think I had known about 47 of them. The one fighter that was a surprise to me was Ibugula, who is a Mongolian ethnicity Chinese fighter. He'll be fighting in the featherweight division in the tournament. I was kind of surprised to see him because I thought that fighters in the tournament, they wanted them to be 32 years or younger. I believe Ibugula is 33. So I'm just gonna pull him up on my screen real quick, let you see who this guy is. So Ibugula is, I believe he's 33. We don't have his age on Tapology, but he has been on quite a roll recently. He's fought mostly in JCK the last several years. He won the lightweight tournament last year, so he's actually dropping down in weight. You can see, really, look at who his losses come to. Ali Muratbek, Aziz Kaydarov, who was potentially going to be in this season as well, Balajin, Shailan, and then a couple of Russian guys here. So yeah, he's been around for a while, super experienced, record 22-11-1. He is fighting, I believe he fights out of Haoshang Gym in Jiangsu province. So he's the one fighter that I was a little bit surprised to see in the tournament. One fighter that I'm a little bit shocked to see is Abdul Abzim Badakshi. Not because he's not a good fighter, he doesn't deserve the shot. I was just surprised to see him in there with all of the drama that happened over the last year. Everything that went down with Matrix Fight Night 9, with him sucker punching Sirkant Sakar, starting basically like a riot at Matrix Fight Night 9, getting Afghan fighters permanently banned from Matrix Fight Night events. I never really understood, or I never heard what sorts of like criminal charges were filed against him. I know at one point there were. He's been laying extremely low since then. People I've talked to that used to know him really closely haven't heard from him, so who knows what is going on with him, but was a little bit shocked to see him in the tournament, especially since there are no other Central Asian fighters in the Road to UFC tournament. I think that's another thing, is like you've got this guy from Afghanistan, but you don't have any Tajik or Kazakh, Kyrgyz fighters, Uzbek fighters in the tournament. So him as the lone Central Asian fighter, that just was surprising to me. You got a lot of returning guys from previous seasons, even a couple UFC veterans. You've got Rong Ju in the season. Yi Jia is back, and a lot of people thought that he was signed to the UFC. He never was signed to the UFC after his loss in the finals of Road to UFC last season. So he never was signed. I have no idea why. It seemed like people really wanted him in. It seemed like he had a pretty good performance against Lee Jung-young in the finals. You know, kind of stinks that he has to go through the whole tournament again. I would have loved to have just seen him get a fight with like UAE Warriors and get his ticket punched to the UFC. So you've also got Xiao Long, who fought in Contender Series. He has been undefeated since fighting in Contender Series. Glad to see him in the tournament. He was supposed to be in the tournament last year, had to bow out of the opening round. Other guys that you've got Keisuke Sasu. He has been on a roll since fighting in Road to UFC last year. You've also got Top Noi fighting in a non-tournament bout. That's awesome. Kim Han Sol won his non-tournament bout last year. So a lot of guys coming back. A lot of guys coming back from last year's season. That's exciting. I kind of wish that, like, rather than them taking up a spot in the tournament, that they could have just either fought in non-tournament bouts or just fought outside the UFC in prominent organizations to get back in. Another guy that I was a little bit surprised to see, a match that doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my eyes, is the non-tournament bout between Tailaka Nuaraji and Kim Han Sol. I feel like Kim Han Sol's is a lot of levels above Tailaka. Trust me, I've been really high on Tailaka's prospect. Let me just pull him up for you so you can kind of see what he's about. So got the teenage Mir picture there. He's super, super young. I would just like to see him develop a little bit more on the Chinese regional scene before getting this shot. I think it's a little bit too early for him. Sim Kai Xiong versus Peter Daniso. That is an awesome fight. I love the fight between Top Noi and Naim Jargal. That is such a cool fight. Thailand's best prospect versus Mongolia's best prospect. Such a cool fight. And then Chris Hoffman versus Yu Sang Hoon should be interesting too. Both those guys right on the edge of being in the UFC. Yu Sang Hoon has actually fought in Contender Series before. I believe he's fought in PFL, or at least he was scheduled to fight in PFL. So another question, of course, is, are these fighters the best representatives from their countries? So kind of going through each country. From China, I would definitely say these are the best prospects that are available. Definitely. I keep tabs on the best prospects in each country and sort of rank them in my eyes, and most of my top ranked fighters from China are going to be in Road to UFC this year. So that's really exciting. Great to see like the next generation coming up. As far as the ones that are really ready to take that next step, I think we got them. The one exception I would say is Ali Muratbek. Had to withdraw because of visa issues, and I thought that he was going to be in this year's season. The response I got from him was a little bit vague, but I also know that he and his coaches feel like he deserves to be directly in the UFC now. So don't be surprised if you see Ali Muratbek be signed directly to the UFC and bypass this whole season. So other countries, I would say South Korea. Do we have the best Korean prospects? It's definitely true that we have a lot of really good fighters and some of the best prospects. Lee Jung-hyun was one of my best prospects from South Korea. But a lot of Korean prospects still kind of spread across the map a little bit. A handful of really good Korean fighters in one championship. A couple that are locked in with Road FC. Some that are with Black Combat. Yes, I mean, there is a lot of really good Korean talent, so you can even reach down pretty far into the well and have pretty good fighters. But as far as like, did we get most of like the top 10, top 15 fighters? I would say sorta, maybe 50-50. Japan, did we get the best out of Japan? Again, it's a similar situation where there's a lot of fighters that are especially in like Rizin and One Championship. So all things considered, I think that we did. There's a lot of really exciting fighters that they signed to Road to UFC this year. Rei Tsuruya, Shuya Kamikubo. There's definitely some Japanese fighters that are overqualified for Road to UFC. You know, Kyoji Horiguchi, guys like that should never have to go through Road to UFC. And a lot of good female Japanese fighters too. So I think they got a lot of good Japanese fighters. Some that were a little bit of a surprise to me, the Kuya Kondo, the Kazuma Moriyama fighters, but we'll see what they can do. So as far as Indonesia, yes, we absolutely got the best fighters from Indonesia. These are champions in One Pride MMA. Most of these guys are undefeated. I think that we definitely got the cream of the crop with Indonesia. And I'm really excited because all those guys have been training in San Diego, getting really good sparring partners. So I think that we'll get to see the best out of Indonesia this year. Now, India, did we get the best that we could get? I'm gonna have to say no on that, because I think that most of India's best fighters are currently with Matrix Fight Night right now. Those contracts are pretty hard to get out of. They're not the kind of promotion that's just going to let people come and go like other ones. So with Indian MMA, I think that this year, you know, we'll see what Rana Rudra Pratap Singh can do. We'll see what Sumit Kumar can do. I'm not saying those aren't good fighters, and you know, I hope they do well, but they just have not been tested on an international level yet, where they have gotten to see like, where they've gotten to beat international competition and get different looks. So the other question is, did we get the best of what was available? That's a different question. I think that they probably tried, but kind of hit a wall with Indian talent. So again, nothing against the two guys that they got. We'll see what they can do. The future is bright. I'm sure we'll get to see some of them down the line. As far as the other countries, the Singapores, the Thailands, the Philippines, I think out of Thailand, yeah, we got the best fighters that we could. Peter Daniso and Top Noi, those are the two guys that you want in there. Singapore, yeah, Sim Kai Seong, he's been my top Singaporean prospect for a while, so I think we definitely got the best out of there. For Philippines, you know, that's definitely an interesting country, because definitely One Championship has a lot of that talent fighting for them. Outside of that, there hasn't been a lot of activity within the Philippines. Fighters have not been super active, but you know, I think Chris Hoffman's a great choice. Obviously, Mark Climaco is a great choice. He could do very well in the flyweight tournament. So going down to my picks. So these are really hard. Every single weight class, there was like 2 or 3 guys that I think could win it. One thing that I would say would be a really big mistake for all of us and for any of you that bet, do not count out the Indonesian fighters. I see everyone doing that. I feel like all the picks that I've seen have been guys from Korea, Japan, and China, but man, do not count out the Indonesian fighters. We saw what happened last season. Jeka Sargi was brought in as an alternate to the lightweight tournament, and he ended up knocking out Pawan Mawan Singh. He ended up knocking out Kiwan Bin in the first round. So don't count out Indonesia. Especially, I feel more confident in Indonesia's offering this year than I did last year. I would say for flyweight, my pick, this is the hardest one for me to pick because flyweight is so good. I would say Rei Tsuruya is going to be my pick for flyweight, followed extremely closely by Lee Jung-hyun. So Rei Tsuruya, 6-0, 20 years old, fights out of Paraista Matsudo. Yeah, this guy is really good, got a lot of people excited. He is with Iridium Management. He's been fighting with Pancrase. And look at that. Yeah, all finishes before the third round. The thing that tipped me over between him and Lee Jung-hyun, who is also undefeated at 8-0, is this win right here over Taiki Akiba. This guy, an experienced Japanese fighter, he last fought Lee Jung-hyun, and both guys, man, Lee Jung-hyun, just 20 years old as well. Ray Tsuruya had a much easier time with this fighter, Taiki Akiba, than Lee Jung-hyun did. But it's all about the matchups. It's all about who shows up on a given night, how they feel. So anything could happen. Would not surprise me at all if it was these two in the finals. Would not surprise me if Lee Jung-hyun wins the whole tournament. So it's a really great tournament. It's crazy how young these guys are. Just like really young fighters. Jinyu Shiye is also really young. Ronald Siahan is really young. Sumit Kumar is really young. So many great fighters that are just have their whole career ahead of them at flyweight. Really exciting. Keep an eye on Ray Tsuruya. Keep an eye on Lee Jung-hyun. Let's go to bantamweight now. Again, a lot of really good fighters. Most of the best Asian talent is at flyweight and bantamweight, so you're going to have some pretty stacked tournaments. My pick for bantamweight is Shuya Kamikubo, simply because of his experience at a high level, and he has looked really good. So let's just take a look at Shuya, shall we? 12-1 record, 27 years old. He has already fought several times for one championship, and he went undefeated for one. He fought 6 times there, and yeah, fought some pretty solid competition there. Bruno Pucci, fought Troy Worthen, fought Kim Dae-hwan. So he, I feel like, is just more experienced than a lot of the other competition. Although I will say probably my second pick for bantamweight is Xiao Long. A lot of people count him out for some reason, but I think he comes off as not very confident sometimes, but he is very good, and he has been undefeated since he appeared at Dana White's Contender Series. That appearance at Contender Series was extremely flat for him. So many of these fighters, you just have to judge based on who have they already fought? Have they fought at an international level? Fighters of different backgrounds. But so many of these guys could totally just like surprise all of us. So that's what's exciting about Road to UFC, is all the breakout stars. There were so many of those last year. For featherweight, my pick is Yi Ja. And it's just hard for me to pick anyone else just based on his experience and how good he looked in the last season. So he's just always improving, and he was the Shanghai PI's #1 pick this year from the combine, so I gotta go with him. It's hard for me to choose anyone different. He's extremely experienced. I will say though, it was tempting for me to pick Lee Kai-wen. Lee Kai-wen has had a lot of hype in his career. He's really exciting, really popular with fans. So I could see him getting far too, especially if he can get some good knockouts. So Lee Kai-wen is fighting Reza Arianto, and man, that's gonna be a great fight. Can't wait for that. So Lee Kai-wen was on the verge of signing with the UFC a little over a year ago, but he ran into Fabricio Andrade, a torn bicep, and then everything kind of got set back. So I'm excited to see what he can do though. He's been wanting his shot for a long time, so happy he finally gets the shot to be in the UFC. So for lightweight, my pick is Shin Haraguchi. One of the least experienced fighters on here. I'll just pull him up here for you. He is a 5-0 Japanese lightweight. Crazy young, he's 24 years old. Here's Shin Haraguchi's record. He has fought some pretty experienced guys. He fought UFC veteran Naoyuki Kotani at Grachan 59 last February and beat him in the first round. So he is an incredible wrestler, and I think that he is going to be a breakout star from this tournament. A lot of other good fighters at lightweight though. You've got Rong Ju. He was probably my second pick based on just the fact that he actually has a win in the UFC. He looked great after the UFC when he fought for UAE Warriors. So I could definitely see Rong Ju going all the way as well. It'll be interesting to see Winders Patalima cutting down to lightweight to fight Shin Haraguchi. Bate Bull, I've always enjoyed watching him. I think he could do well in this tournament. Kiwan Bean is kind of a physical freak. He looked really good recently too. A lot of good fighters at lightweight. Me picking people, there's always like 3 or 4 fighters that are right there as well. So lightweight is a great tournament. So those are my picks for Road to UFC. I really want to hear who you all think are going to make it to the finals. We don't yet know which fights are going to happen which days, either the 27th or the 28th. For those in the US, that might actually end up being the 26th and the 27th. These fights are going to take place in Asia prime time, which means in the middle of the night for the US. So they could actually start a day earlier for us, and of course that'll be on UFC Fight Pass. So I've been starting to get some ideas of content that I'm going to be doing for Road to UFC going forward, so keep an eye out for that. If you have not subscribed to this channel, I'm just going to be giving you so much more Asian MMA coverage over Road to UFC, over whatever. Please subscribe, like this video if you enjoyed it. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Hope you have a great day.